welcome to Two Friends and a Coffin, where two friends who are not 6 feet under are speaking for those who can't speak for themselves.
But we are under 6 feet.
Under 6 feet?
Are you 6 foot?
I'm 5'8".
Then we're under 6 feet.
Okay, we're under 6 feet. We're just not under 6 feet under the ground. Yeah, dirt or astroturf or... Oh well. Well, we are here today. This is a very special moment because this is our first podcast.
Very first.
You're here for this very special moment.
I'm so excited.
This magic moment. So different and so real. We just lost...
I love that song.
Yes. But unfortunately, we just lost every single viewer that...
Who decided to click on our podcast.
Yeah, So, okay. Well, I'm here with my special co-host, Carl.
Hello.
Yes.
And I am here with my special co-host, Behn.
Hey, how are y'all? We are a couple of friends, and we've met in probably the most unusual way. We've both worked in the funeral industry.
Yes, I decided I used to work at a preschool, and then I quit doing that, and I was like, you know what would be fun? Being a body transporter, which is kind of like being an Uber for the dead.
Was it fun, though?
It was so much fun. I'm still doing it. I love it. You go to different homes, you go to crime scenes, you go to hospitals, all this different stuff. Pick up bodies, whether they've died naturally, suicide, murder, and then you take them wherever they then need to go for the people who then are actually going to do what needs to happen.
Mm-hmm. That sounds absolutely interesting. And I'm sure there's an episode there where people would love to pick our brains about things.
Yes, hear our stories.
Mm-hmm. I'm a licensed funeral director and embalmer, and I've worked all over the U.S. and done a lot of different things in the industry. We met when I came back to Utah, and I was working for the same body transport company. Mm-hmm. We call it a first call removal company.
Or last responders.
Last responders? Or first to the last responders?
First to the last. Whichever you want.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of clearly going in different directions and rants and raves and and we just broke out the light things but no drugs. That's we're going to be talking enough about drugs and we don't actually need to be ingesting them.
Correct.
Except for pot, which
I have no qualms about.
I don't have a problem with it, but it's just not my thing.
Same. If I were to do it, I would do edibles because I sing and I don't want to hurt my vocal cords.
Yeah, you heard us singing, and
you may not hear it from this, but I can sing.
It's true. Well, we are here because we became friends over a very interesting and very what many people would call a dark aspect of life, being death.
Yes, you're forced to bond. You're stuck in a truck for 12 hours a day, on a busy day, literally just from scene to scene, bonding over the darkest things. You pick up all different people and you bond quickly. Lots of music
as you're going to your scenes. And we apparently found out that we have a mutual interest of serial killers.
Woo!
And all things dark, like ghosties and
spooks.
Yeah.
And supernatural.
Mm-hmm. And we decided that, we love podcasts. And we decided, hey, let's get one going.
Yeah.
So we figured this would be an unusual podcast in the fact, especially in the true crime world, where we actually are a man and a woman. And I mean, do you identify as a man?
I do identify as a woman.
Okay.
He almost tripped me up there.
She some days.
No, I dress like a man some days when I'm lazy.
Yeah. I mean, you've got your Emerald City shoes right now.
I do.
Yeah.
My Dorothy shoes. They're red sparkly.
Yeah. So
okay, take it back. I'm a girly girl.
Girly girl?
Girly girl.
Who loves Disney. And we both love Disney.
And theater.
Yeah, so there's a lot we have in common. But yeah, so serial killer. What is it about serial killers? So many people enjoy or not enjoy. See, this is the thing.
Fascinated. So many people are fascinated by serial killers.
Yes.
I mean, even if you're not, true crime junkie like us or many others out there, you at least know a serial killer and are at least fascinated by some aspect, I personally believe.
Like, know a serial killer?
Like not personally, but like know of a serial killer. Like, Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah, well, some of you might not know of these individuals, but so that's why we created this podcast, because we wanted to, go into depth about individuals that we think are interesting. Not because they're interesting. Let's start this, get the horse out of the gate. These people are pieces of shit. Shit. Merde. These people...
Garbage.
Yeah, they probably deserve to be forgotten and their stories never told. Except if we did forget these stories, what?
We forget the victims whose stories do deserve to be told.
Exactly. And yes, there's a lot of people who will listen who want the gory details, and,
Yes, we will give them to you.
That's not necessarily the gory details. I don't necessarily think it's dehumanizing to the victims, but, these...
It happened, and it needs to be shared.
Yeah. These things are terrible things that these people did. And these people snuffed out lives that were, you listen to other podcasts and these victims, that people who, their lives ended tragically and in just some of the most obscene ways possible, they're broken down, and a lot of them don't have names. Like,
yes.
The forgotten, those that have never been identified.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. And, but there are those who have been identified. And for their families, I can't even imagine what that's like.
An utter nightmare.
Mm-hmm. And we're not here to belittle the victims. That is not. These people deserve to be remembered. And a lot of times, unfortunately, they're not remembered. They're the actual killers themselves. We're on a first name basis with them, but not necessarily their victims. Larry Pearson. We don't know, who the hell is that?
Yep. Elizabeth Long, Jack the Ripper. She was one of Jack the Ripper's victims, and I will be covering that case for sure. Yeah.
So keep in mind that we're here to not make light either. These are but in discussing these things, we have to, we'd go crazy if we didn't inject something light about this. So it's going to be, if we do poke fun, it's going to be about the situation, about the absurdity of it, about just how dark this is, that this shouldn't even exist in the real world. Like, we shouldn't have to be covering this. We shouldn't have to be talking about this.
There shouldn't be a million true crime podcasts. There are. There shouldn't be enough true crime for there to be a million true crime podcasts. That is what I mean.
Very good way of putting it. I mean, we all want more podcasts, but we wish there was a lot less material to cover. So, what is it, though, about these folks that
make them so fascinating?
Inspire us? No,
Intrigue us?
Intrigue us. There we go. The other I word. What's another I word?
Cognitive?
Whoa. I don't even know what does that even mean?
$3 word there, people.
That's what a doctorate of BS will get you.
Yeah, I graduated. What?
With a doctorate of BS?
Theater, same thing.
But she does know all the lyrics to Rent.
I know all the lyrics to many a musical. That's what's taking up most of the space in my brain.
Mm-hmm. And if you want a musical actually about a serial killer, Jekyll and Hyde.
Jekyll and Hyde, great musical.
Which, incidentally enough, Jekyll and Hyde is loosely based upon the Whitechapel murders that occurred in 1888. 88. Did it go into 1889?
Nope.
Or just
started August of 1888, ended December of 1888.
Yeah. And was it Robert Louis Stevenson? Is he the author?
Honestly, I do not know.
You know what? We need to look this up. But
Google.
We're going to go to the Oracle. But, yeah. And
those of you who don't know, the Whitechapel murders are another word for the Jack the Ripper murders. Before Jack the Ripper named himself in a letter, that's what they were calling them.
And it is Robert Louis Stevenson. But actually, I lied. He published this in 1886.
Oh, maybe it inspired Jack the Ripper. The musical was not written in 1886. The book the musical is based on was written in 1886.
Yes, but that brings up another point. A lot of these serial killers will claim that they got their inspiration from a book or other. We know, like Timothy McVeigh. Arguably not a serial killer, but still just as big a piece of shit as these other people in such a callous regard to human life. But he had a copy of the Turner Diaries in his car. And he claimed that the Turner Diaries inspired him because in that book, they blow up I believe it was an FBI center or some government building, which minutes later he would do the same thing. So there are books, there are movies, there are things that inspire, and we'll get into that a little bit with Berdella. But these people claim that, and that's the book that inspired me.
The Catcher in the Rye is a big book amongst serial killers. It was on the man who shot John Lennon when he did that. And
was that Hinckley?
I believe it was Hinckley.
Not President.
Not gonna lie.
Not President Hinckley of
100%.
the Mormon Prophet.
Love the Beatles, not super knowledgeable about Lennon's death. But I do know that fact about Catcher in the Rye. And quite a few other killers have had that in their possession, crediting it to a hand in their doings.
And I think it's bullshit. I think it's, did they find something inside them that said, this speaks to me? Yes, but I would argue that those seeds were already planted.
It's not like they read the book and were like, I've never thought about this before, now I'm going to go out and kill someone.
Exactly. There was a predisposition somewhere, something in their psyche, whether they would have acted upon it or not, that's a whole different story, but it's simply, this is something that was already there, and they liked it. And I think
I may say it would maybe inspire how they killed, but not if they killed. Like if they read, I don't know, something about killing a woman this way, and they'd be like, oh, I never thought about doing it that way, but I've certainly thought about doing it. I could credit that. I could go behind that, but just straight up that, because then all of us weirdos who like true crime would be murderers, and we're not.
Would we really?
Well, when you look at it like that, being like, reading a book about killing makes you kill, then no.
Serial killers there is a specific definition by the FBI.
Three or more.
If it's, and they have to be at different times too. There has to be a lag between
If you've killed 3 people in one setting, you're a mass murderer, not a serial killer.
Yeah, serial murder.
There's a difference.
Yep. Serial killer, generally, they go through patterns of boom or bust. They'll go through their first murder. A lot of them are accidental. People they know. Well, not accidental, but they're generally
unintentional in the way that it wasn't like, oopsie, I did that, but like, oh.
But now that I did,
what I'm talking
about. but there's cycles where they'll stop for a while and then they'll pick up, and then they might stop for a while, and then it comes to a point though that they start amping up and ramping up, and they start going into what other podcasters have called berserker mode, and that's when they seem to not be able to stop, and they suddenly, the time period between their kills
is less and less and less.
Exactly,
and typically more gruesome.
They amp up. They seem to be unable to control themselves at that point.
They lose control.
They also, that's usually the time where they get caught because they do something wrong.
Either they pick the wrong person in their frenzy, who is a person that they know that then is going to tie back to them, or they let somebody get away because they're so frantic. Like, there's many things that at that point they make mistakes that lead back to them, which thank goodness they do. If it's not for those mistakes, then who knows how many people they'd kill.
what we're driving at here is just that there's very different elements, and there's a strong psychology here.
Yes.
And note to self and note to Carl's, we are not psychologists.
We are not I took one psychology class and one sociology class. I am not a psychologist, but I do find it fascinating.
Yeah.
I find psychology fascinating.
And I don't want to have sex with my mother, so I'm clearly not a Freudian either.
Good to hear.
Good to hear.
Glad to hear you don't want to have sex with your mother.
Some of these killers, though, did.
They did.
They have mommy issues.
You know, some people want to have sex with their daughters.
Wow.
Wow. Cut that out.
Where have we gone? Like we said, we'll go on to tangents and we'll go on to rants and, yeah. Yeah, so one of the things that we're going to be talking about a lot is serial killers.
Yes.
And serial killers are a huge phenomenon. There's
really
always been there.
Always been there.
We've always had an interest in them. You go through the newspapers, you go through accounts, you'll find a lot of people are just fascinated by these
hundreds of books.
Hundreds
of books.
Thousands
upon thousands. Tons and tons of podcasts about them.
Movies.
Documentaries, movies.
Comic books.
Yeah. They're TV shows, porn, I'm sure.
I'm pretty sure there is. We don't know of any
personally.
Listeners, if you know of any, send them in. We'll watch them, and then we'll comment on them.
So, who would you say is one of your favorite serial killers?
One of my favorite serial killers. Well, not favorite per se, but interesting ones.
Interesting, yeah.
I would say that's Bob Berdella.
Who's that?
Bob Berdella, he was in operation between 84 and 88, and he killed 6 men.
Wow.
He had one that got away, and that was the one that nailed him. Because, he escaped and was able to go to the authorities, and that ended his reign of terror.
So what about him makes him one of your most intriguing?
He's one that most people don't know about. You'll sometimes run across his name, you're like, I've never heard of him. And then you'll hear a story, and you're like, why have I never heard of this guy?
I had never heard of him.
No, and this guy, though, is up there. Yes, he has a very low kill count. I mean, 6 doesn't sound like much.
Right.
When you compare it to folks like Bundy or Gacy or, God, who's the new one? The Golden
State Killer?
Yeah, the Samuel, whatever his name is, they're saying he's up in, he's got confirmed 50-something or 70?
The one that was just named that had been...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's Golden State Killer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he, he's up there, and he's now total gold star material, and yet this, the top of the tops. Yeah, and this guy, he doesn't have it in the kill count, but as far as sadistic, this guy is up there at the top.
Ooh.
Yeah, just absolutely a sick individual that ended the lives of 6 people in the most horrible ways you can imagine.
Wow. So I'm assuming you're going to do an episode on him.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I'm very intrigued. Do you want to tell me just a little bit more?
Well, he was he was born in Ohio, and he lived in Kansas City, and that's where he did his murders. He was an everyday average Joe, just walrus mustache and fat guy, and he would just walk. He owned a antique store curio shop called Bob's Bizarre Bazaar.
That is a great name.
It is a good name. I would name that. Not Bob's, of course, because my name's not Bob, but...
Behn's Bizarre Bazaar.
Behn's Bizarre Bazaar. Especially Behn's,
Ooh.
Yeah, that does sound really good, yeah. But he lived in a quiet, leafy, suburban neighborhood. He was the captain of the neighborhood watch.
Oh, that's spooky.
Yeah, and he opened his home to, it was like a At times it was a halfway house for individuals who were recovering from substance abuse, who were homeless. He would bring them into his house and give them a place to stay, cheap place to stay for low money, or, they could do chores. And he was looked at as I wouldn't say a pillar of the community, but he was definitely looked on as a good neighbor.
So outwardly, he seemed like a great guy.
Oh yeah, outwardly he was like, no one suspected what was going on. I mean,
it makes it creepier.
Exactly, and at the same time, he was helping these guys get off of drugs and other substances. He was having a party house at the same time where he would have other folks come in who were doing drugs, and he would encourage it, and he would inject them with all sorts of his own little cocktails, and knock them out, and then drag them up to his basement or down to his attic. And see what I did there?
Had to acknowledge. Moving on.
And then he would basically proceed to torture them for however long they managed to stay alive through it.
That's so terrible.
And his goal wasn't to kill them. His goal was to keep them alive as long as possible. At the beginning, they died pretty quickly. But as he got to know his crafts and became very good at it, he was able to keep people in constant torture for up to 6 weeks, was I think what one of them went through.
Wow. Poor guys?
Guys,
his victims are guys? Oh,
he went after young homosexual men. Not necessarily them being homosexual, but for those who were, who were doing survival sex, gay for pay, individuals with that kind of background. Those were his targets. So.
Well, I'm really looking forward to hearing more about it.
Yeah, I'm very excited. We'll get into that. And I'm assuming you have someone that you want to cover.
I do. I'm really excited to cover Jack the Ripper.
Oh, Jack the Knife.
He is one of my favorites.
The Demon of Whitechapel.
The Demon of Whitechapel.
So tell us why.
I'm so intrigued by him because he was never caught. Never. And I personally don't think ever will be. There's way too many suspects to even narrow it down, and being so long ago, I don't believe any evidence could be definitively proven as his. His crimes were just so brutal. He cut women open, he took organs, he would take other organs and just throw them over shoulders. That
is brutal.
Brutal.
Absolutely brutal.
Yeah. And he killed 5 confirmed. He operated from August 1888 to November 1888. So a very short time period to have killed 5 people. And that was the extent, all of his crimes were committed within a mile of each other in Whitechapel. So a very small time period, very small area.
Very consolidated.
Yeah. And the suspects range from doctors to vets to butchers to aristocrats to princes. There's just so much about him and so many theories. It's fascinating to me.
That's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
So yes, I'm looking forward to doing a whole episode on him and not all the theories, because there's hundreds of theories, but some top theories, and yeah, I'm looking forward to doing one.
That's where we're at. We've given you 2 very different serial killers from very different time periods, different circumstances, and different,
places.
Different levels of us knowing about them too. We know everything there is to know about Bob Berdella, about him and his life. We know nothing about Jack. Nothing. Nope. Nothing. And yet, with Jack, we know...
People know Jack.
We know a lot about his victims. We know a lot about them.
Yeah.
And yet, in a lot of ways, we don't know very much about the victims of Berdella.
Yeah.
Just because they lived such young lives. They were people on the fringes of society that, whether they were... male sex workers, which male sex workers are much more stigmatized than female sex workers, too.
I would agree with that, yeah. I think that that also has, the stigma of homosexuality to it as well.
I'm not gay.
Right.
I'm not gay.
But...
You didn't stick it in your butt.
Yeah.
Even though I did stick it in your butt.
But, you know what I mean? You get what I mean, though.
Yeah.
Like, making fun of me.
Yeah. That machismo, you know, men aren't supposed to do that, but women, it's okay for them. So what do you want to do with this podcast in the future? What is your aim of having a podcast, Carls?
I think just talking about stories that we find fascinating and hopefully, sorry, that was my phone. Hopefully people find fascinating too. I mean, if nothing else, it can just be something fun for us to do to kind of discuss and learn and...
Exactly. And I'd like to, you know, not just do serial murder, like not just have a serial murder podcast, but get into some very interesting parts of life, like the supernatural.
I'd love to do some ghost stuff, some organized crime stuff.
Ooh, organized crime. Like, what would you do?
I would definitely do Al Capone.
Al Capone.
Scarface.
Syphilis. We're gonna be talking a lot about syphilis.
Yeah, just like all different things. Like even I told Behn earlier, I was like, you know who would be cool? Rasputin.
Rasputin.
And
Rasputin. Actually, no, that was Lady Gaga. That was Lady Gaga. You know which one I'm talking about? That song that gets in your head. The Rasputin, lover of the Russian queen.
Yeah, that guy.
That guy.
And the Romanovs would be fascinating.
And maybe I'll wear that cape. And be like,
I can wear my cape too. Yeah.
I would love to do an episode on the Bridgewater Triangle.
Ooh, yes.
I grew up like 10 miles from there. Yeah, and I never heard about it till I left. So... And yet there was like the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot and like murders going on right near where I grew up. UFOs too. So we'll get into that. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
And I think we also should have an episode on the funeral business.
Yes. Funeral business.
Yep. Ask a Mortician, which actually there's another podcast.
Like that's a podcast.
Yeah, that is. But you can ask us because we're cooler.
Because I'm not a mortician, but I got some stuff. I got some knowledge.
Some
might
interesting...
not sound like it.
Yeah, well...
From what I just said.
You got geography?
Hey, just shut up. I failed that.
Where's London?
Europe.
Europe.
That way. I know where London is. I don't know where some other stuff is.
So if we were to bring out a map of England, you'd be able to say where London is?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
You say it. You're saying this maybe?
I'm saying it with a definitive voice, but a funny face.
Because, dear listeners, we have faces for radio.
I'm beautiful. I don't know what he's talking about.
Okay. That was projection.
My face is gorgeous. I'm gorgeous.
Ow, ow. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our first pilot episode.
Yeah.
And we'd love to have you follow along with us as we explore the darker side of life and death.
And death.
So feel free to follow us. We'd love to have you at Instagram.
2 Friends in a Coffin.
And on Facebook.
2 Friends in a Coffin.
And on email.
2friendsinacoffin@gmail.com. And please send us any suggestions you would like us to... Any cases you'd like us to do.
Yes.
Any suggestions. We would love to hear from you and love to widen our knowledge. And if you have any comments, questions, please contact us. We would love to hear anything from you guys.
And we'll hear from you soon. Bye.
Bye.